Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're gonna have a busy one. To start with, we need to move these rockets. Reason being is we need the 35 tiles worth of height demanded by the larger petroleum engine, which means we're going to be dealing with all sorts of heat problems and probably going to have to dig up some of these arbor trees. We also need to begin taming this saltwater geyser and doing what it takes to turn all that salt water into regular clean water, and that way we can eventually feed it to a bunch of bristle blossoms and some sleet wheat. In order to do that, I think we're going to need a couple more folks over here, and more folks means more cots, more food, and more water. Additionally, while this planetoid is looking really nice, it could also use a couple more dupe hands, especially if we plan on sending some of them over to Frostland. We also need to head over to Ariel. Ariel is one of the planetoids in our system that has a tundra biome, and that tundra biome has our sleet wheat. It also has a sandstone biome, which I'm hoping to be able to find some bristle blossoms. Actually, we don't even need the bristle blossoms. We have 6 seeds right here. No telling where I found them or where I put them, but the dupes will sort all that out by themselves. So I think we're going to start over on Frostland and send them a familiar face. They've already made friends with Andy. Andy was the one that went over there and helped him out in the great hydrogen vent crisis of episode 14 or 15. I think we'll start off by expanding the bathrooms a little bit and setting up a new barracks. So you might be wondering why these arbor trees are lacking irrigation, and it's due to the fact that we're using a little bit too much of this cool slush geyser. Now, it only has 4 cycles remaining till it starts erupting again. Additionally, we have 3.5 tanks full, and they are the buffer tanks heading over to our home planetoid. Now, it's not a huge deal that Frostland itself is missing water. Well, actually, it looks like it is going to be a huge deal because for some reason we have almost ran out of our water that we're using for our bathrooms. But in actuality, because there's only 2 dupes living on this planetoid, they could breathe this oxygen for quite some time before it would start running low. So it looks like this bathroom still has 10 kilos worth of water. This one here is empty, and it's because we take all that clean water that we sieve from over here, and that's what we use for our bathroom, and then we send some of this polluted water over to the home planetoid. Sort of a waste not, want not situation. So I think what we're going to end up doing is deconstructing this liquid reservoir. They'll dump the excess into here, which will give us enough water to put through this water sieve and put these bathrooms back online. Now, whether or not that happens before someone pees their pants, that's anyone's guess. And I think we'll cut it down to just 3 buffer tanks, and that might leave enough in here to stay on Frostland in between the dormancy period of this cool slush geyser. Of course, it doesn't really matter that much because we're going to be taming the saltwater geyser as well, and that's going to give us plenty of fresh water. In fact, it'd be better off using the desalinator to make that fresh water, and that way we don't need any sand. I don't know, we'll see how the numbers come out based on how many sleet wheat and bristle blossoms we're running. Now, unfortunately, this saltwater geyser erupts at 95°C, and it is not dormant. This is one of those situations that we would normally just put one of the dupes in great risk and just get it done. But the good news is this water isn't too warm right now. And although this thing is not stifled, probably something to do with the oxygen pockets in here, the water here is only 13 degrees. So instead of going through this door to get to this saltwater geyser, I think we're going to come in from above. We don't need to do much. Just get a steel liquid pump and then box the whole thing in, and then we can worry how we're going to cool the water and store it afterwards. We're also going to add them a little bit more power here on Frostland, even though we're still using all the hydrogen still present in the atmosphere, and it's going to give us excess power for a long time. It's definitely not infinitely sustainable. Once all this hydrogen's used up, all the hydrogen's used up. Now eventually we'll get in here and tame this hydrogen vent as well, but one thing at a time. Step 1, let's get Andy a place to sleep. We're going to make a little makeshift barracks. We're eventually going to bring another dupe over here who's going to be helping out with all the farming. So we'll go ahead and make the 4th cot now. Now, J-Ray is also on Frostland, and they're sort of a J-Ray of all trades. But one thing they can do is make some pretty good artwork. So we'll start off with a few sculpting blocks here, and I'd like to put some paintings here, but we need some reed fiber for that. Additionally, we're going to need a little bit of steel for this saltwater geyser, and we want to add a few more solar panels, so we'll need some glass. So we will load up everything we need here, one at a time, starting with some reed fiber. We definitely don't need 20 kilos, so we'll say 50 kilos worth of reed fiber. We have over 1,000 units, so I think we'll be okay. And with the reed fiber dropped off, we can unselect the reed fiber and then send over 2 tons of glass. Now, this is taking a little longer than we'd wanted to. One of the reasons is because we took yet another dupe off of this planetoid, so we're going to be looking for a couple of new dupes inside the printing pod. The glass has now been dropped off, so we'll drop it on the ground, and then we're going to send over 2 tons of steel as well. With the steel dropped off, we now have all of our ingredients we need, so we can go to the conveyor loader, tell it to pick up everything that it sees, and the auto sweeper will do the rest and send everything over. Over on Frostland, Miko's trying to work on the large sculpting block, and we don't want Miko to be doing that. We'd rather save it for the much more experienced J-Ray. So we're just going to disallow Miko from doing any decorating. Sorry, Miko. With those materials now over on Frostland, we can actually put in our pump. We'll throw some insulated tiles around it as well. Hopefully we can get this all built before this water level drops. We'll also need to sweep out all these goodies here. We've also made great progress on the new bathrooms and the new barracks, though tasks are still a little bit behind. I'm keeping an eye on this printing pod because we might as well just add the dupe over here since we need a 4th. They're not going to be sort of a critical dupe. They're just going to be doing farming, so it's okay if they spend their time leveling up on the sleet wheat and eventually the bristle blossoms as well. And now we've finally completed improved hydrocarbon propulsion, giving us access to the big petroleum engine. Looks like we need to start work over here. To start with, we're going to need to launch this rocket, so I think we're going to add some pickled meal. All the water's already loaded up, and the oxygen looks great thanks to 2 tons of oxalite. I think we're going to go ahead and increase this to 4 tons to make sure Captain Archer is able to stay in space for a little bit longer. We do have a rover ready, so when we do launch this rocket, we're going to send it directly over to Ariel. Speaking of which, the ESS Susan has discovered another planetoid down here called Ujito. Ujito is one of the marshy asteroids, and there's not much to it. It has marsh, magma, and jungle. That's about it. Speaking of food, we got a pretty good recommendation from the comments in the last video. Instead of adding an entire other ranch full of slicksters, we can have all the excess slicksters consume all the extra carbon dioxide and produce more of our oil that we need. And the only thing it requires is moving the conveyor chute where the eggs are dropped off to here. We will have to keep an eye on it because there's going to be a lot of slicksters in here, and that many slicksters is bound to lower our FPS and probably create additional bugs. But the good news is we can get rid of this gas valve system now. We've connected this gas pump here and created a second line that goes directly up to the slicksters. And because of that, each portion will have its own source of carbon dioxide. With all these slicksters up here producing more oil, we've just connected a simple gas pump here to a vent, and it'll all be added to the main crude oil tank here. What is this? 31 grams of ethanol. I haven't been able to figure out why or how, but every once in a while, a little bit of ethanol ends up in these pipes. It has to be coming from here, but I haven't seen a single problem out of this in probably 200-300 cycles. Just in case, we better put a liquid filter on this, otherwise we are going to be in trouble when that ethanol makes its way to the petroleum boiler and then off gases. That's definitely not what we want. And look at this, before I could even put the filter in, there's one little blob right here. Lucky for us, that seems to be the only blob in this entire line. So we'll isolate it and take care of it and then put in our liquid filter. Our liquid filter system is in, and because we're only using it to filter out the ethanol, the filter's not going to have to run that much, which means it's not going to have to use the power. If we would have done it the other way and had it filter out all the crude oil, it'd be running at 120 watts pretty much 100% of the time. Just something to keep in mind when you're putting in filters. The Enterprise is also ready. We have 46,000 calories and 4 tons worth of oxalite. We will crew it up and select the destination right over here to Ariel. I'm excited to get another opportunity to use Rover because last time I really didn't give the Rover an opportunity to do much exploring. All right, Susan, time to move out of the way. Oh, Susan, that can't be good. Right now, this carbon dioxide is 1,765 degrees. Susan, on the other hand, has a body temperature of 27 degrees. Now, I understand that carbon dioxide isn't the best conductor, but that is some significant heat. Maybe we should be capturing all that carbon dioxide. But with both rockets gone, we can actually move these platforms. Kudos to the comments for reminding me that we can just move these platforms wherever we want while the rockets are away. And then when the rockets come back, they'll land wherever we have the platforms. So when we start dealing with the max height, right here is 35 tiles. So that's where the scaffolding needs to begin. So it looks like this is going to be a good rocket position. And then this one right here, we'll have to get rid of some of these ladder tiles. Now, while all that carbon dioxide won't pass through these insulated tiles, there's not much of a chance that the heat won't. So we're going to have to see and then adjust these arbitraries as necessary, which is really a shame because I spent a lot of time planting all these. Heading back over to Frostland, we're going to add a couple of more of the solar panels. Unfortunately, Frostland only has a peak light of 30,000 lux. While I haven't done the experiment itself, you can see it's almost midday and this solar panel is not cooking at 100%. So the whole trick of using a pyramid structure for your solar panels, something like one here, and then you move this one over a couple tiles, it really doesn't become worth it until you have a lot more of the light. I think we're also going to throw another one here. And it looks like we've found a pretty good farmer in this ash can. They have farming, tidying, and rocketry. We love it when the mid and late game dupes have 3 interests. It really helps us out, but they're also decent at decorating and ranching. Their only negative is they can't do doctoring. So without further ado, welcome to our next dupe, Victor Neves. Update on our space mission. The ESS Susan has found some space debris, but we have a couple of more unknown objects over here. But after that, Susan only has 8 tiles worth of range left, which is 1 more than they need to make it back home. So we'll let them work that telescope magic a little bit longer before we send them back home to their new rocket landing platforms, which so far has not been built yet. For the simple fact, we just need more dupes on this planetoid. Over on Frostland, we have our saltwater geyser completely enclosed with insulated tiles, so none of that heat's going to go anywhere, and we have our steel liquid pump in there. Now we just got to connect it with some piping, and that's where we're going to go down to this desalinator right here, and we also move this polluted water around, and that way the nice cold polluted water will keep this area chilled, even though the desalinator is going to be dumping a lot of heat through it. And then we'll take that water and send it over here. Now this is where we're going to need some sort of cooling device. Now I know Frostland on its own is very cold, but we're designing things to last 500 and 1,000 cycles, and this chill wouldn't last that long if we just dumped a bunch of 95C water everywhere. One idea would be running it through this area with the cool slush geyser, but 95C averaged out with minus 10C polluted water would produce about 40 degrees on average for both this polluted water and the water that would be sending through it. That's not cold enough for the clean water, and that's definitely too warm for all the uses that we have over here, which means it's time to build a debris chiller that's going to act as a liquid chiller. And we're also going to head in here and clean up all this water as well. So that's going to be another pump, except this one doesn't have to be out of steel. We're going to throw a filter on it to separate all the salt water and the polluted water. The polluted water will head over to our home colony, and the salt water will be added to this pipe here going through the desalinator. Luckily, this system won't last forever because power is going to start being an issue. Right now, we only have 1 strand of conductive wire on this entire power grid, and before the desalinator is even running, it has the potential to hit over 6,000 watts. Now, nothing runs that constantly, but if we were to run the desalinator plus this liquid tepidizer plus the eventual thermal aquatuner, we'd have some issues. So I think this time we're actually going to try a debris chiller with a thermoregulator. We have the hydrogen here, which is not that bad as far as gases go. It has a specific heat capacity of 2.4, although its thermal conductivity stinks like most gases do. This may not work, but it's worth a try. But in order for it to be the most effective, I think we're going to have to make sure that that hydrogen cooling loop is very small. That way it can go through the thermoregulator a lot quicker than what the water is coming through. Remember, this water is going to be used to backfill bathrooms and oxygen, but primarily to feed bristle blossoms and sleetwheat. And while they are thirsty boys, they definitely shouldn't be using the 10 kilos per second that a liquid pump can send through it. The first step of that process is going to be the steam turbine. We'll put the thermoregulator in here. In fact, it might even be worth putting 2 thermoregulators in here because we don't really have a chance at freezing that hydrogen. And 2 thermoregulators is only 480 watts compared to 1.2 kilowatts of the thermal aquatuner. It's worth a try. We're also going to dig out all of this and then put our nice aluminum metal tiles here. But all this is going to take the dupes a little while, so let's go check back out in space. So Lady Ruff and the ESS Susan have finished telescoping this entire area, and I got really excited because this was a glimmering asteroid. Unfortunately, it's not the glimmering asteroid that we're looking for, as there's no fullerene here. So we're going to send Lady Ruff back home, get refueled, and then send them back out. We've also changed something a little bit. We used to be taking all the molten larva eggs, you can see there's one down there, and sending them to an egg crusher. Well, there's no reason to do that if we're just going to drown them all instantly, so they would never be producing petroleum. Except producing petroleum's not so bad. The petroleum will land here, eventually get sucked up, dropped off into the crude oil tank, and then sent through the petroleum boiler. And it doesn't matter if you send petroleum through the petroleum boiler. Now, granted, this is a long way for it to travel, only to be sent right back up to our petroleum storage here. Now, we could put another filter in here and just send the petroleum directly over here, but I don't know if it's worth the power cost. Okay, this isn't good, Andy. How in the world did you get over here? This hasn't been dug out, so I'm not sure how they reached up over here. There's no way to get through it here. I'm guessing what happened is they built this insulated tile from over on this side. Andy, I suppose we can deconstruct it, but we don't have much time because this is all just hydrogen. Of course, Andy's an amazing builder, so that wasn't too bad. Elsewhere in the space map, John Archer and the Enterprise have made it to Ariel, which means it's time to deploy our rover. Well, this isn't good. As you can see, there's a bunch of abyssalite covering Ariel, and I don't believe Rover's going to be able to get through it. It also, unfortunately, has a magma surface, which I would have realized had I taken the time to read the planetoid description, where it clearly says the lava surface of the flipped asteroid will make it challenging to start a rocketry program. You think? I suppose we should probably not waste our rover. I just realized that Rover actually barks. That is simply amazing. Now, we landed Rover all the way over here. Now, there's not going to be much they can do, but I think if we position them right, they'll be able to dig down at least a little bit to give us more vision. But you can't move Rover like you do a standard dupe. Before we do that, we need to deconstruct the rover's lander module. That way, when we do send some unlucky dupes here, they'll have some steel to start off with. And I suppose it's actually not going to be too bad once we have dupes here. The entire center area seems to be protected by abyssalite. Don't worry about the scalding message. It is just Lady Ruff coming home. Thanks for scaring me, Lady Ruff. Before you go home, will you put your suit back on, please? Thank you very much. That would have prevented you from being scalded. But as I was saying, when we do get dupes here, we'll be able to put a ladder segment all the way down the center. Well, hopefully. I really need Rover to move over to here, because if we have them dig out this, they're not going to be able to get down, and then they'll just be trapped. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Rover. Now we can dig from this side, and hopefully they will not be able to dig from there, so they'll jump down. And nope, that is not the case. Rover, we need you to jump down. Here, boy! Come here, Rover! And now's the time where I'm going to sit and wait for Rover to come down in here so we can start digging again. I wonder if we try to build an airflow tile right here, if they'll have to jump down. First, they're going to have to grab some steel. That's probably steel we're going to... Nope. It looks like they can build it from that far away, too. Cancel that one, Rover. Just jump. Come here, buddy. Did anybody see that? Okay, Rover's still holding the steel. I thought my steel disappeared into the vacuum of space. You want a hard mode, Clay? Make everything disappear into the vacuum of space. I suppose I might be able to build a manual airlock. And then Rover might go through the door to continue digging. And the puzzle has been solved. Belay my last. Now Rover can't even get down here. Maybe we can deconstruct the manual airlock and then build it one tile lower. Unreachable dig. The good news is Rover keeps taking the steel. Bad news is I'm not sure how to get down here. I don't think Rover can use the fire pole. Never mind. Rover can't even build the fire pole. Alright, something has happened. We're down to 200 kilos worth of steel. Rover has 100 kilos, and then here's 100 kilos here. There's no steel here. In fact, somehow Rover is deleting the steel. That is not very friendly, buddy. Well, we've lost all that steel, but we may have figured out how to get Rover down here. What if we deconstruct it while Rover is standing on it? Please fall, Rover. Please fall. Don't jump. Just fall. Oh. Something's definitely glitchy. Whenever Rover jumps, you can see the steel. Pretty sure that's not how Clay designed it. And now we're all out of steel. Thanks, Rover. Bad robot. So that was very anticlimactic, but at least we know that we'll be able to dig down here. But now we're going to have to either bring 2 rockets or drop another rover so we can leave another 400 kilos worth of steel. We have the ESS Susan almost finished loaded up. We're going to increase it to 4 tons of oxalite as well, and we have another 47,000 calories worth of pickled meal. And we're crewing up the ESS Susan, except we're going to land it immediately on rocket platform 724 and change out the engine. We're going to have to move some pipes around, that way we can fuel up the new engine, but it shouldn't be a problem. Well, it's official. Susan has a death wish. Oh yeah. Oh, that can't be good. Susan, what are you doing? And Susan still only has a body temperature of 31.4 degrees. The great thing about this rename mod is I can also rename the platforms too. And with all the available options in the world, we went with Platform 1. And we'll just land Susan right here. But no, Lady Ruff, you can't get out. Let's go ahead and deconstruct the engine while we have a dupe inside the compartment. That seems perfectly safe. And there she is, in all of her glory. Now, the regular petroleum engines, they don't have their own storage. They only work off the fuel tanks. So because of that, we've actually reduced our range down to 9 tiles, which means it's time to add another large liquid fuel tank. And it makes sense to replace the small oxidizer tank with a large one. So we'll build that as well. And then we'll go ahead and remove this one. And it still gives us plenty of height on top of the rocket once we finish all this. By the way, we planned it absolutely perfect. On our home planetoid, we're going to grab this Bonnie here. They're another farmer and rancher, which we could use more of, and they can also do some tidying in their off time. Yeah, they're a yokel and a pacifist, but these don't really affect the dupe for what we need them to do. Welcome to our next duplicate, Lindsay Grossman. Over on Frostland, we're about ready to fire this thing up. Last couple things to do is put the steam turbine in, and then we gotta load up our cooling loop full of hydrogen. Can't imagine where we're gonna get any of it. Now I'm trying something a little bit different with our cooling loop this time. Now this may not work, but we're gonna see. So this setup does not work because this thermal aqua tuner is constantly blocked. We've completed our updates to... Oh no, there's igneous rock there. Hold on. This isn't a way to show a proper showing. Alright, this is better. We can now concentrate on the pipes instead of the igneous rock. The coolant comes in, and this thermosensor decides whether or not it needs to be chilled. If it doesn't, it bypasses the thermal regulator, jumps over, and then heads into the next regulator, who's also being controlled by this thermosensor. And likewise, if the coolant does not need to be cooled, it heads off into this bridge. Basically, before we were trying to put them in parallel, but they need to be in series. And now that I say it that way, I feel like I've done this before and tried to put them in parallel and it just doesn't work. So the long and short of it, just have one regulator feed into the next regulator. And now we don't have a single pipe blocked and they are just running flat out. The hydrogen's already down to 5 degrees and the pipes themselves are down to 5 degrees. Now it's time for the test though. We'll connect this pipe here. And while right now it's not going to be too bad of a test, because all this salt water is still pretty chill. But we'll have a pretty good idea based on the overall temperature of the metal tiles in the hydrogen, and also how often these thermal regulators are running. Let me give it a few cycles and see how it goes. In fact, we're probably going to need to add a lot more liquid reservoirs, just so that we have ample amount of storage to do our testing. Our final farming design won't have this many buffer tanks, but this will work for now. The plus side is the desalinator is going to be producing a lot of salt, and we're turning all that salt into sand, which we're then using to load up our smart storage bin. That way we don't have to use any of the extra materials. For instance, on this planetoid we have igneous rock going to sand if this ever gets too low. We've also made some changes to the power grid here on Frostine. First, we separated the grid into 2 halves. One being supplied by all of these solar panels, which are feeding into these jumbo batteries, and the other being supplied by this hydrogen generator, these wood burners, and eventually this steam turbine. Now it's close, but I haven't seen it brown out yet, so fingers crossed. One cool feature that I wanted to highlight was that we strapped a bunch of metal tiles to the top of the cool slush geyser reservoir, and that way any of the heat that the jumbo batteries are creating are instantly going to be cooled by the environment being chilled by the cool slush geyser. And since we put in this solar panel, we needed to knock out all of this extra stuff here Well, I wanted to show you because we had not had access to this area for 1081 cycles. Look at all the eggshells, all being supplied by these 3 shine bugs. That's a fairly significant amount of lime. Over on our home planetoid, our new platforms are complete. Oh, we need to name this platform. And of course, it's called Platform 2. But the real story is that we now have a large solid oxidizer tank and 2 large liquid fuel tanks. And for that effort, we were rewarded with a range of 20 tiles, but with a much taller rocket. John Archer has about 4 cycles worth of food left, and they've done an incredible job. We're up over 920 data banks on this trip. In fact, they only have a ton and a half of plastic left. If they can burn through that, we'll be completely done with our orbital data collection. I did want to show you a discovery that I made, and it's that the rocket is no longer ejecting this carbon dioxide into the vacuum of space. I'm not sure if it's a glitch in the game, but I could have sworn they changed it to where you could just vent the gases directly out into space. And just to make sure it couldn't happen in orbit, we moved them out 1 tile and still that carbon dioxide is sitting there. If this is a change in a current patch or something, we're going to have to modify our system by including a lot of the carbon dioxide vent pipes, and that way it'll all empty when we land. Let me know if you've seen something similar or if I'm just missing it. Over on Frostland, our system is complete. I'm not 100% convinced it's going to be worthwhile. We even added the reloop system. That way, in case this water's not cold enough, it'll go back through. We have this liquid thermo sensor set at 5 degrees, so when this water is down to 5 degrees, it'll dump it. But these thermal regulators are having to work nearly 100% of the time. The hydrogen comes out at about -5 to -10. By the time it goes back in, it's around 7 degrees. But as soon as we shift a new batch of water, for instance, we'll say 10 degrees just for the experiment, all that water is going to be let out of the system and new water is going to come in. And this water comes in at 39 degrees. And you can see right now that the tiles are at 9 degrees, 10 degrees, 11 degrees, and they just continue to climb. I'm not sure if I might be able to beat this by brute forcing it with, say, -100 hydrogen, or if it's just the difference in the fact that it's 1 kilo of hydrogen trying to cool down 10 kilos of water at a time. Now, don't get me wrong, the system does work. It will cool your water. It's just, it may be a bit too slow for what we need it, because it'll eventually cool the water and supply it to the reservoirs, but it all depends on how much water we need per second. Now, it did stabilize fairly quickly. You can see that we went from 40 degrees to 13 after a few passes, but like I said, it's all going to depend on how much cold water we're going to need per second. But even if this doesn't end up working, it was still a good experiment, and I'm glad I did it. Our new system is definitely working. We are producing more oil and petroleum for that matter. Unfortunately, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. We already have 169 critters in here, but there's still 19 kilos worth of carbon dioxide, which tells me the simulation is not able to keep up and allow all the slickers to eat at once. Otherwise, they would drain that amount of carbon dioxide pretty quickly. So I'm going to keep an eye on this. Worst case scenario, we just go to a different planetoid and get our oil from there. In our next episode, we're going to be sending the ESS Susan out to continue to search for the mysterious asteroid field that has the fullerene. Not to mention, we still need to get sleet wheat and berry blossoms online. We'll see. I'd love to know what you thought about this episode, and I look forward to reading your comments. So until next time, I'll talk to you soon.